Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to my 2024 library tour. In this episode, I'm going to be doing the wall shelf of my history collection. So let's get going because there are quite a few books on this wall shelf. First up is Greece, Biography of a Modern Nation by Roderick Beaton. So this is a history of Greece from the early 19th century and its war for independence from the Ottoman Empire to the financial crisis of the early 2010s. This is a really good book. I greatly enjoyed it. I like the mix of political history and cultural history, particularly in the 20th century. Next is a book that I have not gotten to. This is The Burgundians, A Vanished Empire, A History of 1,111 Years and One Day by Bart Van Loo, translated by Nancy Forrest Flyer. So this is a history of uh, the Burgundians, who were a people in what is now northeastern France into the Low Countries and I think into parts of what is now Germany. But I have not gotten to this book yet. Another book I have not gotten to yet is Frederick the Great, King of Prussia by Tim Blaney, which is a gross oversight on my part because I really need to read this biography at some point in the future. Nor have I read Catherine the Great and Potemkin, The Imperial Love Affair by Simon Sebag Montefiore. So this is a dual biography of Catherine the Great and her great love, Potemkin. This next book I have read, Insurgent Empire, Anti-Colonial Resistance and British Descent by Priyamvada Gopal. So this is a history of how Britons opposed British colonialism and imperialism from both within the colonized countries, but also from Britain itself. And it is very dense, but also interesting, and I'm quite glad I read it. It is actually quite good. I have also read Winter King, Henry VII and the Dawn of Tudor England by Thomas Penn. This is also a really good book, a really good study of Henry VII and his reign, and also into the early reign of his son, Henry VIII, who started his reign by cleaning house. I also really liked this book, Cuba, An American History by Ada Ferrer. Uh, this is a history of uh, Cuba and its relationship with the United States, which has been for centuries rather toxic, and is really good. I have not gotten around to Peter the Great, His Life and World by Robert K. Massey. The only Peter the Great biography I have. Another book that I really enjoyed is Arabs: A 3,000-Year History of Peoples, Tribes, and Empires by Tim McIntosh Smith. This is a great history of the Arabs. There is humor and levity in this book that really makes this history pop. It is amazing, just amazing. I also have a history of the Arab peoples by Albert Hourani. This is a bit more dense, a bit more intellectually oriented than, say, Arabs is, but quite good as well. Next is The Witch, A History of Fear from Ancient Times to the Present by Ronald Hutton. So this is a global history of the figure of the witch. The book is very dense, but I found it a rewarding read. Next is A Queer History of the United States by Michael Bronski. This is a pretty good book. I quite enjoyed reading it. I also rather enjoyed The Golden Rhinoceros, Histories of the African Middle Ages by Francois Xavier Fauvel. And let's see if this is translated. Yes, translated by Troy Tice. This was also quite good. The Holy Roman Empire, A Short History by Barbara Stolberg Rillinger, translated by Yair Minsker. This is a pretty good introduction to the Holy Roman Empire, particularly from a more academically rigorous point of view, although very slim. I was wondering where I put this book. This is In Search of the Phoenicians by Josephine Quinn. I really should be putting this with my ancient history collection. So this is a history of the Phoenicians, and also a history of what we know about them. And it's quite good, or it's really more a history about how theories about the Phoenicians than maybe the Phoenicians themselves, but it is quite good. It's very similar to Sea Peoples by Christina Thompson. I have not gotten to Western Europe's Democratic Age, 1945 to 1968 by Martin Conway. Nor have I gotten to The Last White Rose, The Secret Wars of the Tudors by Desmond Stewart. Nor have I gotten to Rural Nostalgia, A Backwards History of Britain by Hannah Rose Woods, which I think was one of the last books I picked up from Book Depository. This next book I have read and really quite enjoyed. It is Maoism, A Global History by Julia Lovell. So this book looks at not only Maoism in China, but also Maoism around the world, in Indonesia, in Latin America, in Britain, in India, and Nepal. And it is quite good. The next book is also quite good. This is Inglorious Empire, What the British Did to India by Shashi Tharoor. So this is a look at both the negative and also sometimes positive effects of British domination of the Indian subcontinent. Although in the end, the ledger is very much on the negative side. It was very much negative side. But this is a very fascinating book. I really enjoyed reading it. I also enjoyed reading Black Wave, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the 40-year rivalry that unraveled culture, religion, and collective memory in the Middle East by Kim Ghattas. This is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. Next is The Black Prince of Florence by Catherine Fletcher. So this is a biography of Alessandro de' Medici, who was the first Duke of Florence. He was also either a cousin or half-brother to Catherine de' Medici. And this is an amazing biography. I really enjoyed it. Next is a book I have not gotten to yet. It is The Coming of the Third Reich by Richard J. Evans. So this is the first part of a trilogy by Richard J. Evans that looks at Nazi Germany. So this is the first part in which the Nazis come to power. And the first few years of, well, I guess it's just them coming to power. I don't have the other volumes in the trilogy. I've been meaning to pick them up for a while. The next two books are a duology, Battle Royal, The Wars of the Roses, 1440 to 1462, by Hugh Pacino. So this is a look at the Wars of the Roses. And I also have Blood Royal, The Wars of Lancaster and York, 1462 to 1485, also by Hugh Pacino. Wish I could have gotten them in the same size. Next is Bismarck, A Life by Jonathan Steinberg. I had to go at this earlier this year and didn't quite get on with it. I might come back to it at some point. Maybe. Next is The Medieval Foundations of England by G.O. Sales. Have not gotten around to it. I really enjoyed this next book, The Restless Kings, Henry II, His Sons, and the Wars for the Plantagenet Crown by Nick Barrett. So this is a history of the early Plantagenet dynasty from Henry II up through John. And it is quite good, although slim. I am a lot less fond of The Husband Hunters, American heiresses who married into the British aristocracy by Anne de Courcy. So the book is interesting, but there are some parts that bothered me quite a bit. I have not gotten to, but I mean to get to, Bad Mexicans, Race, Empire, and Revolution in the Borderlands by Kelly Lytle Hernandez. So the next batch of books are Penguins, which makes me wonder if maybe I should do a penguin collection. But then again, I want to organize things more by subject than by publisher, so maybe not. Although they all do look cool together. But anyway, so this is Eugene Rogan, The Fall of the Ottomans, The Great War in the Middle East, 1914 to 1920. So this is one of two books I have on the eventual dissolution of the Ottoman Empire in the aftermath of World War I, and also the Ottomans in World War I. This one is so far my favorite of the two. I did not quite get on with the other one. But my one critique of the book is that the sources are a little too British. I wish the Turks had and the Ottomans had a bit more presence. Speaking of that other book on the last days of the Ottomans, this is The Last Days of the Ottoman Empire by Ryan Gingeris. So this is much like the other book, although I did not quite get on with this as well as I would have liked. The next book is by Thomas Penn. It is The Brothers York, an English tragedy. So this is another look at the Wars of the Roses. Next is The Fourth Crusade and the Sack of Constantinople by Jonathan Phillips. Have not gotten around to it yet. Nor have I gotten around to Feudal Society by Mark Bloch. This is volume 1, The Growth of Ties of Dependence, and it is translated by L.A. Mannion. So I have not gotten around to it yet. I have had this book for probably over 10 years. One thing about the Friends of the Library book sale is that its history selection has usually not quite been to my taste. Anyway, next up is a book that I really enjoyed. This is The 100 Years' War on Palestine, A History of Settler Colonialism and Resistance, 1917 to 2017, by Rashid Khalidi. So this is an amazing look at the Israel-Palestine conflict with a decided bias, but it is really good. I mean, he makes it clear that he has this bias, and I really enjoyed it. It really transformed my thinking on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I also really enjoyed Blood on the River, A Chronicle of Mutiny and Freedom on the Wild Coast by Marjolaine Kars. So this is the untold story of the Berbice Slave Rebellion, and it is very powerful. This is wonderful, absolutely a wonderful book. Won the Frederick Douglass Book Prize and the Kendall History Prize. I also enjoyed How to Hide an Empire, A History of the Greater United States by Daniel Immerwahr. So this is a history of the overseas territories that the United States conquered, from Puerto Rico through to the Philippines and the occupation of Japan, as well as several other areas that aren't kind of part of the continental United States. I have yet got to A History of Crete by Chris Morey. So this is a history of the Greek island of Crete. Next is The Triumph of the Moon by Ronald Hutton. So this is a history of modern pagan witchcraft, or really a history of the religion known as Wicca. And it is quite fascinating, but myth-busting. Very much this is a myth-busting look at Wicca. And also fairly dense, too, which I think a lot of his work is. And finally, the last book on this shelf is SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome by Mary Beard. So this is a really fantastic history of Rome, told in a fairly idiosyncratic way. So Mary Beard sort of limits her history from the foundations of Rome, or at least what we can glean as the foundations of Rome, up through the extension of Roman citizenship to the majority of the population living under Roman rule within the empire. Mary Beard is a fantastic writer. She has a sense of humor that really enlivens her history. So quite good. So that concludes the wall shelf of my history collection. I will be continuing the history tour later with this middle bookcase here. So until then, BookTube, thank you. Have a great day and stay safe.